At 08:34 hours local time, a United States Navy supply ship was alone in the southern Persian Gulf. No escort, no weapons, no armor, just open water, 41,000 tons of explosive cargo, and 6 Iranian fast boats accelerating toward it at 45 knots. What happened next would expose the single most dangerous vulnerability in American naval power. Not a technological failure, not an intelligence breakdown, something far more fundamental. The assumption that logistics ships were low-priority targets. That assumption died in 12 minutes. The vessel was a Lewis and Clark class dry cargo and ammunition ship. 689 feet of commercial-grade steel. 124 civilian mariners aboard. No weapon systems, no defensive countermeasures, no armor plating. What it carried below decks was the critical variable. Standard missiles, evolved Sea Sparrow interceptors, Mark 54 torpedoes, tens of thousands of rounds of surface combatant ammunition, enough explosive ordnance to level a city block if a single enemy round found. The right compartment. The ship was not a warship. It was a floating magazine. Its assigned escort, a Cyclone-class patrol ship, had been diverted 16 hours earlier to investigate a suspicious contact near the Strait of Hormuz. The diversion was supposed to last 8 hours. It lasted twice that. Fifth Fleet Command accepted the gap as low risk. The intelligence assessment showed no significant Iranian Revolutionary Guard naval activity south of the transit corridor in the preceding 72 hours. That assessment was 14 hours old. The supply ship's route followed standard commercial shipping lanes through the southern Gulf, a path it had transited dozens of times before. The crew had been briefed on the escort diversion. They had been told the gap was temporary. They had been told the risk was acceptable. They had been given helmets and flak jackets before departure. Standard issue for Gulf transits. Against 14.5mm machine gun rounds, flak jackets offer something between minimal protection and false comfort. Nobody aboard that morning believed they were sailing into a fight. At 08:39, 5 new radar contacts appeared on the bridge navigation screen. They emerged from behind the first contact, a deliberate masking maneuver. The lead vessel had been screening them during approach. 6 boats total, all bearing directly on the supply ship's projected track, all accelerating simultaneously. 12 knots became 35, 35 became 45, all 6 boats in formation, closing fast. The ship's master needed no military briefing to understand what he was seeing. He had run Gulf transits for 8 years. He had been briefed on Iranian swarm doctrine before every single passage. 6 fast boats in tight formation on an intercept course meant exactly one thing. He issued 3 orders simultaneously: distress signal on international maritime frequency and 5th Fleet secure channel, hard turn to port at maximum speed. All crew below decks immediately. Maximum speed for a 41,000-ton ammunition ship was 20 knots. The turning radius at that speed was measured in nautical miles. Evasion in any real tactical sense was not possible. The master knew this. He issued the orders anyway, because 20 knots in the wrong direction was better than 0, and because the distress call was the only weapon he had. The distress call reached 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain at 08:44. The duty officer pulled up the asset map immediately. The nearest combatant was the USS Carney, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, 32 nautical miles northwest, too far for direct engagement, close enough to launch its SH-60B Seahawk helicopter. Flight time to the supply ship, 12 minutes. The second option was faster. 2 A-18E Super Hornets from the carrier air wing aboard USS Eisenhower, 95 nautical miles south, at full afterburner, 8 minutes, 8 minutes. The supply ship had neither. It had open water and a civilian crew in flak jackets watching 6 boats close the distance at 45 knots. Every second that passed was another 200 feet of ocean gone. At 08:46, the first shots were fired, machine gun rounds from 2 boats simultaneously. 14.5mm rounds tore across the supply ship's superstructure. Bridge windows shattered. A fire erupted in an external storage locker on the main deck. The bridge crew dropped prone and continued steering from the emergency station below the main bridge level. The sound below decks was described afterward by one civilian mariner as 1,000 hammers beating the hull at once, a continuous, relentless percussion that vibrated through the steel decks and bulkheads. The crew could not see what was happening. They could only hear it and wait. At 08:47, a starboard boat closed to within 300 meters and aimed directly at the waterline. This was not harassment fire. This was not a warning. This was a deliberate attempt to penetrate the hull and reach the ammunition magazines 2 decks below. Lewis and Clark class ships are built with commercial-grade steel, 15 millimeters of mild plate at the waterline. At 300 meters, 14.5 millimeters armor-piercing rounds can defeat 20 millimeters of mild steel. The rounds penetrated the outer hull in at least 3 locations. Seawater entered a forward ballast compartment. The magazines were 2 decks lower. The margin between a damaged ship and a catastrophic detonation was measured in inches of steel and the angle of incoming fire. At 08:49, the master made the decision that saved the ship. He ordered the fire main activated, high-pressure water hoses deployed over the side, not to fight fire, to create a wall of spray that degraded the attackers' visibility and disrupted their targeting. Simultaneously, he ordered smoke floats deployed from the stern. Thick orange chemical smoke billowed across the ship's wake in a dense, rolling cloud. The spray and smoke did not stop the attack, but they forced the attacking boats to close further to maintain effective fire. They spent more time inside the engagement envelope. Machine gun bursts that had been walking across the superstructure began falling short into the water. The boats had to choose between accuracy and distance. Closing further meant exposing themselves longer when help arrived, and help was coming. At 08:51, radar flight arrived overhead. 2 A-18E Super Hornets screamed across the engagement at 500 feet and 450 knots. The roar of twin afterburning engines at low altitude is not merely loud, it is physically disorienting. On small, open, fast boats traveling at speed, the effect is immediate and visceral. Extreme noise, violent wind disruption, the sudden, undeniable awareness that precision munitions are now directly overhead. 2 boats broke immediately and turned northeast at full speed. The Super Hornets banked hard and came around for a second pass. The flight lead descended to 300 feet and deployed flares. Bright white, burning magnesium arcing across the sky in a visual warning that required no translation. 1 more boat turned away. 3 remained, still closing, still firing at the supply ship's hull at 0852. 5th Fleet granted weapons release authorization. The rules of engagement were unambiguous. The supply ship was under active hostile fire. Personnel were at risk. Defensive response was authorized. The lead Super Hornet rolled in from 1.5 miles at 400 knots. The weapon was an AGM-65 Maverick missile, infrared guided, originally designed to destroy armored vehicles on a European battlefield. Against a small, open fiberglass boat on a warm Persian Gulf morning, the thermal contrast was perfect. The seeker had no difficulty finding its target. The Maverick locked the thermal signature of the nearest boat, 250 meters from the supply ship's hull. Engines burning, crew exposed, 4 seconds, impact. The 300-pound penetrating warhead struck amidships. The boat did not burn, it did not sink. It fragmented, debris spread across a 400-meter radius of open water. The second Super Hornet engaged the next boat with a second Maverick. Same weapon, same lock, same result. The third boat turned and ran, northeast at maximum speed toward Iranian waters. The flight lead tracked it for 30 seconds. The boat was disengaging. No further ordnance was expended. The decision not to fire carried its own message. The United States could have destroyed all 3 remaining boats. It chose to destroy 2 and let 1 carry the news home. At 0853, the Seahawk from USS Carney arrived on station. It assumed overwatch and tracked the fleeing boat to the edge of Iranian territorial waters. At 0855, the engagement was over. 12 minutes from first shot to silence. The supply ship sustained 37 confirmed hull impacts, 3 waterline penetrations, 1 external fire, extinguished by the crew before aviation assets arrived, 2 bridge windows destroyed, 4 civilian mariners injured, 2 from flying glass, 1 from a secondary fire, 1 from a fall during evasive maneuvering. All 4 survived. All 4 returned to duty. The ammunition magazines were untouched. The master's decision to maintain maximum speed throughout the engagement kept the waterline penetrations above the most vulnerable cargo spaces. Post-incident analysis concluded that had the ship slowed or stopped, the angle of incoming fire would have shifted downward, toward the magazines. The resulting detonation would not have been measured in hull damage. It would have been measured in the absence of a ship entirely, and the deaths of 124 civilian mariners in international waters. The numbers behind the engagement told their own brutal story. 2 AGM-65 Maverick missiles expended, roughly $120,000 each. Total ordnance cost for the entire engagement, under $250,000. The supply ship it protected carried ammunition valued at over $200 million. The Fifth Fleet operations it sustained were incalculable. Iran lost 2 fast boats, crewed vessels, personnel who did not return to port. Return on investment, decisive. Within 30 days, United States Central Command issued a standing directive. No ammunition ship transits the Persian Gulf without dedicated military escort. No exceptions, no risk-accepted gaps, no temporary vulnerabilities accepted as low probability. If an escort is unavailable, the supply ship holds in port until one is assigned. Within 90 days, Fifth Fleet began quietly installing Mark 38 chain gun mounts on high-value military sealift command vessels. 150 caliber machine gun positions operated by embarked Navy security teams, not civilian mariners. Trained personnel with rules of engagement and authority to engage threats without waiting for authorization from Bahrain. The program was not publicly acknowledged. Allied signals intelligence obtained in the weeks following the incident contained an Iranian military planning document that circulated through Pentagon planning cells for months afterward. The assessment described American carrier strike groups in terms that revealed the true strategic logic behind the attack. The warships are the sword. The supply ships are the hand that holds it. Cut the hand. The Iranian targeting. Calculus had shifted, not toward destroyers or carriers where American defensive capability was overwhelming, toward the logistics chain, the fuel, the ammunition, the spare parts, the invisible infrastructure that allows the Fifth Fleet to sustain combat operations beyond 72 hours. An aircraft carrier without jet fuel is an airfield that cannot move. A destroyer with empty missile magazines is a radar system with a deck gun. The most powerful naval force in the world becomes a collection of expensive, stationary steel the moment the supply chain breaks. The 12-minute attack on an unarmed ship exposed that reality with brutal clarity, and it raised a question that no escort directive and no chain gun mount fully answers. The Iranians used machine guns, fast boats, relatively simple, relatively cheap asymmetric tactics against an undefended target. The attack came within inches of catastrophic success using weapons that cost less than a used car. What happens when the next attack uses something faster? Something that doesn't need a crew aboard to find its target. Iran operates anti-ship missiles in significant numbers. Cruise missiles that fly low and fast and do not break off when jets appear overhead. A supply ship with a Mark 38 chain gun and an embarked security team is a harder target than an unescorted vessel. It is not a defended one in any meaningful sense against a missile strike. The hand that holds the sword is no longer completely exposed, but the sword requires a steady hand to remain effective. And in the southern Persian Gulf, the distance between steady and severed is measured in escort availability, intelligence currency, and 12 minutes of open water. If this breakdown was worth your time, hit subscribe and share it with someone who needs to understand how modern naval power actually works. More of these stories need to be told.